forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March. For the fans who love the crunch of the pads, prefer a dunk, and expect nothing but the best. It's Bigger 10. Here's Steve Deace.
And welcome to this week's episode of Bigger 10. I'm Steve Deace alongside my co-host Aaron McIntire. Good to see you again, brother. You are back from your honeymoon.
Yes.
Warm and sunny Florida. I trust you had fun.
Absolutely. Can you see the difference in complexion?
You still look, you look like maybe a Nosferatu who got a little bit more sleep than you typically do.
There you go.
I mean, but no, not really. Was I supposed to?
No.
Yeah, I think so. Well, let's get to it. Let's begin with our Big Five on Bigger 10 this week. And of course, we are recording this on a Wednesday, and this is not just any Wednesday, Aaron. It is it used to be National Signing Day. It's the second signing day now. There's not much left over. A lot of the best players have already committed, but hey, there's always a few tasty morsels out there. And we now have the final recruiting class ratings for Big Ten football programs. Let's take a look courtesy of the 24/7 Sports composite ratings. And we've got them in the order that they are ranked nationally. Ohio State with the number 2 class in the country. And in parentheses there, as I just said, that's their average player rating according to 24/7's individual rating. So this is what they're ranked by their composite as a team. And in parentheses, how each of their players on average was rated by 24/7. So Ohio State with the number 2 class, Michigan finishes with the number 10 class in the country, and Wisconsin with one of their highest rated recruiting classes since the recruiting service era began in the late 1990s at number 15. Maryland is back in the top 25. Remember the previous coach at Maryland. Before what happened to Jordan McNair. He had a couple of top 25 recruiting classes as well. Nebraska with another top 25 class under Scott Frost. Penn State, James Franklin, pretty honest, saying, hey, this is a disappointing class. And number 21 in the country, most teams would take that, but at Penn State, that is a disappointment. Iowa with a very good class under Kirk Ferentz. The couple of the schools that I'm the most intrigued by, though, as we get into this next tier, Minnesota at 37.
Yep.
You know, like I don't blame Indiana for where they're at. Indiana, you'll see next year, at least you're supposed to see next year, the boost for the breakthrough season they had this year, right? That's typically the way it works, especially now with the early signing period. So many of these guys are signing in December before your season's even over now. So you typically see the boost as a program the year after your breakthrough. So we'll check in on Indiana again a year from now. But this should have been Minnesota's big breakthrough year. And they're sitting there with the 37th ranked class in the country. And then look at Purdue. One thing we had seen under Jeff Brom, I mean, he came in right away and recruited a top 25 class. 72. 72. That's one of the lowest rankings you can get for a program not in the power or not in the group of 5, or who didn't have, as Illinois did, a head coaching change. So those are the two things that stand out to me about these recruiting rankings. What about you, Aaron?
Same basic thing. I'll start with Wisconsin on the high end there. You know, I think I asked you a couple of weeks ago just regarding recruiting, whether you would rather reload or actually develop players, because reloading means you're losing a lot of players. Developing players, though, means you're probably going to lose those as well because they're going to the NFL. The thing with Wisconsin, and I would say the same thing if it was Iowa or Northwestern who had the same type of recruiting class. Do they recruit lesser rated guys because those are the guys that just fit into the culture there? Mm-hmm. Or do they recruit the guys who are, higher rated? And we'll see whether or not they actually fit into the culture. The reason why I bring that up is because it seems like Ohio State, Alabama, the blue bloods of the college football world, They can basically go out, get the best players, and no matter if or when or how those guys fit into the actual locker room culture or the culture in general, they're just so talented they can play or hang with anybody. The reason I say that is we don't know if that class is actually going to fit into Wisconsin's culture, but if it does, the sky is the limit because of what they can do and what they can develop. The same thing goes for Iowa and Northwestern as well.
Meaning we see what they do every year with the number 35 class.
Precisely.
If those guys fit in culturally, what would they do with the 15th ranked class?
Exactly.
Right?
So that's going to be interesting to look at. And I would also agree with Minnesota and Purdue. You've already talked about Minnesota, so I'll hone in on Purdue. I was pretty high on Jeff Brom coming into last season, really the last 2 years. Man, if they don't get something done this season, if they don't have a successful, solid season and a good bowl appearance, I think the leash is pretty short for Jeff Brom. And that's really surprising considering the Louisville job was on the table for him just not too long ago, just last season, actually. That's a yo. So I'd be pretty concerned if I'm in West Lafayette right now about the direction of that program. But maybe that's what they want. Maybe they want all expectations against them. Maybe they want a chip on their shoulder. But man, hopefully they can actually do some development there, because that's all that you can do right now, at least with that class.
Let's move on and talk some Big Ten basketball. Let's check in now on where things stand in the conference race heading into action on Wednesday. So Michigan with a 2-game lead in the loss column, but they are on a quote-unquote pause, which isn't a pause. They're on a full-fledged quarantine, but we'll talk more about that here in another topic. Illinois, Iowa are next, 2 games back in the loss column. Ohio State, Wisconsin. Ohio State just announced today another member of their backcourt rotation is going to be out for the year, so will be interesting to see if there's any impact there. Rutgers is back to 500 in the league after that 5-game losing streak, and we were talking and just where's the momentum for Minnesota off that breakthrough in recruiting, and Purdue, it looks like they've lost their momentum. How about seeing Michigan State in 13th place in February?
It's really
in
weird.
The Big Ten Conference.
Really
and
weird.
I mean, this was a team. Now, I remember I said at the start of the year they were preseason top 10 everywhere. I didn't get that. I mean, if you watched their team last year, Xavier Tillman and Cassius Winston were the whole team. I mean, they were the rising tide that lifted every boat. I didn't know how they were just going to replace those guys, but who thought they were going to be? I didn't think they belonged in the top 10, but 2-7 in the Big Ten. So what stands out there for you looking at the Big Ten standings heading in now to the month of February?
Obviously, Michigan State, Northwestern. I know this seems like forever ago, but they were ranked going into Big Ten play, or at least at the very beginning of Big Ten play. They have absolutely cratered. Penn State is a thorn in people's side. They just beat Wisconsin before Wisconsin got revenge last night, the day we're taping this Tuesday. Penn State, they're just a plucky team, but I think that may be all that they are. Maryland continuing to struggle. I guess maybe the biggest surprise, and I don't know if you can call it a surprise, but Ohio State vying for first place in the Big Ten. I think they were a little under the radar, probably not as under the radar as Michigan, but they're right in the thick of things right now. It's really kind of shaking out the way that I think a lot of us thought that it would. Illinois, to this point, has taken the more winding road to getting where they are. They survived Indiana last night. But I would say at this point, of the teams in the top 5 there that have the biggest shot of actually dethroning Michigan at this point of the season, I would say it has to be either Illinois or Ohio State. Just the way Michigan plays defense, I don't know if anybody can. But then again, this is the Big Ten, so anything can happen right now. You
mentioned Ohio State. I have a high regard, even as a Michigan fan. I think Chris Holtman's a hell of a basketball coach. You look at the way they're winning games this year. It's a totally different program than it was his first few years. I mean, first one to 61, a lot of nights playing them. They forced you into a rock fight. They're like 70th or something in defensive efficiency at Ken Palm right now. I mean, they're playing a completely different brand of basketball, and that's what great coaches do. There's two ways to do this. You're Bobby Knight, and you know the motion offense better than any man on planet Earth. And so because of that, you can form players to come to you, although you have a high transfer rate when that happens. Or you're amorphous, man. I mean, you adapt to the talent you have, and you're seeing that right now with Chris Holtmann at Ohio State. So as we go to the next segment, throw the Big Ten standings back up there one more time. So we've got a situation, and again, we're going to get more into the specifics of the Michigan situation here in a second. But Michigan is on a 2-week quarantine that doesn't expire until Sunday. Now, they're not playing the next game after that because Michigan's quarantine is not a pause. Guys can't lift, can't shoot. They can run outside in pairs. I don't know how many of you have spent February in Michigan in your lifetime, but I've spent quite a few growing up there. Running outside is not necessarily high on the priority list at this time of year. They're up there. So these guys can't do anything but like work out with bands in their rooms. They're going to have to go through like a mini camp of like a week of conditioning just to get their cardio back to where it was, and then practice a few days to play. I think it's entirely possible. We won't see Michigan play a game until Valentine's Day at the earliest, and that's against Wisconsin, I believe, or it could be as late as February 18th, Aaron, at Rutgers. So my question is, we went through this in football where they had to amend the rule for Ohio State, right? Mm-hmm. Now, I know, listen, if I'm a fan of Iowa, Illinois, I'm losing my mind right now. I don't blame you. Hey, we got to have some kind of minimum game requirement. But let me just tell you, as a Michigan fan, I probably told you more about this than you knew. They're not practicing or anything. So, yeah, they get some advantage that y'all are still beating each other up. But keep in mind, they didn't pause like other programs. They're in a quarantine. They're going to have to start their season completely all over again. So here's the question on the table. All these games that have to be made up. If you're the Big Ten, are you better off making these games up that final week of the season or risking putting everybody together and risking an infection at the Big Ten tournament before you get to March Madness? What would you do?
So if I'm the Big Ten, and I'm going to take that as face value. If I'm the conference, what is in the best interest of my conference? And that's getting as many teams into the March Madness, the NCAA tournament as possible. Mm-hmm. And I think that means actually playing. I think that actually means playing the tournament at this point. Now, personally, and I'll explain why I think that. Personally, even as an Iowa fan, yeah, I believe there should be some minimum game requirement. This is ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous what Michigan is going through right now. I mean, I guess they just, as you've pointed out, Steve, they just care more about their student athletes.
That's the sanctimonious
any other school, any other school in the country.
No positive test at Michigan, by the way.
Yeah.
This is not players sloughed off, didn't keep the protocols. They have not had a single positive test inside the men's basketball program all year long.
Yeah, that's absolutely ludicrous. I think the word fairness gets a bad rap and it's overused, but it's just not fair. It's not fair for Michigan, and so I would say that even as an Iowa fan, even though I might benefit from it eventually, the reason why I think it's best for the Big Ten to play the tournament, one, you never know. You never know when one team that wasn't going to make the tournament or wasn't even on the bubble might get in. And that would obviously, or at least have the greatly increase your chances of getting an extra team into the NCAA tournament as well. I think that's enough of a reason to actually play the tournament, because then if you have a couple of teams that are on the bubble, they might be able to play their way off the bubble as well. So I think playing the tournament is what's in the best interest of the Big Ten Conference.
All right, we're going to return to the Michigan dilemma here in a second, but let's go back to football. So Pat Fitzgerald lost his athletic director. There were a lot of reports in December that he's going to listen to NFL offers for the first time. Now you kind of got to wonder if dude just was playing the thug life here of leverage, thinking, we got a new AD coming in. Now's the time for me to really throw my weight around, because he ends up with essentially he's coach for life, an extension through at least I think it is 2030. So Pat Fitzgerald at Northwestern, coach for life. What do you think, Aaron?
He made the wrong decision. I think that's a pretty easy call to make. I just think he would have been so much happier, in the NFL. somewhere like, I don't know. What's the furthest place away from Iowa? New York.
I hear you. Yes.
Or Miami.
Yes.
I know they didn't have necessarily openings in Miami that I know of anyway. I just think he made the wrong.
Jacksonville could have gone there.
Yeah, made the wrong decision here. But hey, you can always reverse course, tomorrow or next year or anytime.
So back to the Michigan situation. So what happens here is an Olympic sport athlete, which is we used to call these non-revenue sports, but we had to come up with a politically correct term. So we decided to go with Olympic sports, but it's non-revenue sports. A non-revenue student athlete went home to the UK over Christmas break, came home, came back for the second semester. And at Michigan, the students have been gone from campus. They've been off campus for a while. The athletes have pretty much been in a bubble by themselves on campus already. Keep that in mind. The student comes back from Christmas break in the UK and tests positive for this new UK variant. The Michigan Department of Health sends Michigan a sternly worded recommendation that says it should shut down for 2 weeks just to make sure that this new variant doesn't spread like wildfire through its student athletes. Now, it's not an order from the Department of Health, but it's a strongly worded recommendation, which means if Michigan doesn't do that and somebody tests positive, heaven forbid gets sick, I mean, they're getting their rear end suit off because they ignored this disclaimer. And so the government didn't say, no, you had to do this, because if the government does that, what are the phone calls to the Michigan Department of Health the next day, right? To the governor's office the next day, right? So they worded it as a strongly encouraged recommendation. But the implication of this was very clear, and that was to leave this mess on the doorstep of the Michigan Athletic Administration. And now here we are. And the pause that they have been on for these 2 weeks, as I said a few minutes ago, Aaron, it is not a pause. They are in a full-fledged quarantine. They can run in pairs outside. That's it. They're not shooting. They're not scrimmaging. They're not practicing. They're not lifting. They're not doing anything. And you're talking about a basketball program right now that is clearing away in first place on the men's side. The women's team has its highest AP ranking of all time. I think the wrestling team is like number 2 or 3 in the country behind Iowa or something right now. All these sports, no positive tests. All of them shut down because of this recommendation. And hey, you don't want to be the guy on the Michigan team who snuck in, some hoops at a church or something. And then when you do come back, test positive and shuts everything down again, right? So I know there's this idea around the other teams around the league that Michigan's getting an advantage here while the rest of these teams are beating themselves up. They're kind of the leader in the clubhouse and just sit around and let you all just keep piling up the losses. But keep in mind, when they come back, they're coming back from ground zero. I mean, it's like they're rebooting their entire season right when they were playing as well as any team in the country. And it's all because a foreign exchange student or a foreign non-revenue sports student came back home or came back to campus with this UK variant from home. Nobody else tested positive for it in many of these programs, including men's basketball, and they all got shut down anyway. Aaron, your thoughts on that?
Makes little to no sense. I get why the decision was made. I get the way, and you laid it out very clearly there. This is depriving, and this is not, I mean, this has tentacles that go into high school athletics as well in Michigan, where high school athletes, winter sports are still canceled. I just saw, what was it, Alabama's men's basketball coach, I believe it was?
Nate Oates, who's a former high school coach in Michigan.
Released a statement this morning before we taped this saying, this is depriving. We had a handful of recruits from Michigan, and we're just having to put them on hold because we can't see their game film at all.
Juwan Howard has spoken out publicly about this too, the Michigan coach.
Yeah, so it's just, it's a madness. I don't know why you can explain to me why Minnesota or Wisconsin or Penn State, all roughly on the same latitude as Michigan, why they, and Michigan State for that matter as well, in the state, all those schools around the Detroit area as well, why they can play, but the University of Michigan cannot. It makes
there's a culture there at Michigan. You know, often we talk about schools being cutthroat, doing whatever it takes to win, cutting corners, breaking NCAA rules, right? Stuff like that. You know, bearing legalities, so they never come to bear. Michigan takes pride. It appears in doing the exact opposite. You know, the sanctimony at Michigan, they seem to take pride in like making it more difficult actually for their teams to win, making it even harder for their teams to win. It's not as if, hey, if one of the basketball players had tested positive, would we be having this conversation right now? We'd be like, no, those are the policies, right? Nobody tested positive. Nobody's tested positive since. This is just sanctimonious garbage. But that's, and I say this as a Michigan fan, sanctimonious garbage seems to be Michigan athletics' crowning achievement. It's like there's an entire wing at the MDen of sanctimony national champs, Michigan, every single year. The idea that you just care that much more about your students than they do at Michigan State, that's garbage. This whole process was garbage. But if you're a Michigan fan, you've just come to expect it. It's kind of par for the course that they will look to do something to play some kind of moral superiority card that doesn't really display any moral superiority, but clearly limits and inhibits your favorite team's ability to be leaders and best and victors valiant. We'll come back and we'll play this week's edition of Big Ten Would You Rather next. All right, let's get to it. This week's edition of Would You Rather here on Bigger Ten. Aaron, would you rather have Big Ten football now, which was the original plan, remember, when the season was first postponed, or are you glad they went ahead and played in the fall, all the clumsiness and zany hijinks that ensued, nevertheless, like everyone else?
Glad they played in the fall, without a doubt. I think that was the best course of action because guess what? The Big Ten got to compete and represent in the national championship game. Would we have gotten that chance now? No. We just would have been essentially, if they didn't play in the fall, guys, they wouldn't have played in the winter. I'm convinced they wouldn't have played in the winter.
I was as well. Although it did seem like when the heat was coming from Ohio State and Nebraska and Iowa that they actually started putting some serious teeth to it. But then it just begged the question, if you can play in January, why can't you play in October, right? So there you go.
Yeah, this next one's for you. Would you rather be Archie Miller or Jim Ferry? That's Penn State's basketball coach.
You know, I'd rather be Archie Miller because I'm still getting paid, yo. And if I get fired, I'm walking out of here with a ridiculous amount. I'm walking out of here with Tennessee, I'm loving it, McDonald's bags of cash. Have you been following that story? Yeah. The Tennessee football program. I mean, I'm walking out of here with a life-changing amount of money. Now, I think, you know, could Jim Ferry get that job if they make the NCAA tournament? I mean, if they make the NCAA tournament, it's going to be difficult to not give him that job. But if I'm Archie Miller, I walk out. There's two possibilities, man. I'm enjoying life with my buyout, or I get to coach, you know, one of the Cadillac cherry jobs in college basketball. So I'd still rather be him.
Next one is from you.
Would you rather have fiery Fran McCaffrey as your basketball coach, or the pouty Fran McCaffrey that we saw after what loss? Illinois loss. Thank you. I got to tell you, on a personal level, I loved the pouty Fran McCaffrey. And if he would have thrown out the, I'm just here so I don't get fined, dude, I would have freaking bought my first piece of Iowa gear in my life. I was waiting for him to drop that blast. I'm only here so I don't get fined. But what do you think, fiery or pouty Fran?
See, to me, they're one and the same, at least in my estimation as an Iowa fan. But if you put a gun to my head, I would rather have fiery Fran all the time instead of pouty Fran. I mean, the pouty Fran is, as you explained, it can be kind of fun, but I like the fiery Fran because he's the type of guy that if he's on your team, you know, it might drive you nuts sometimes or might annoy you. But if he's, you know, if you're rooting for the other team, he drives you absolutely crazy as long as you're losing. Now, if you're beating him, then yeah, that's kind of nice. But I would rather have fiery Fran.
All right, when we come back,
I got one more left for you.
That's right. There's one more for me. My bad. Thank you.
Would you rather have our current set of Big Ten basketball officials or have ones that are actually competent?
I got to tell you that I watch a lot of college basketball. I don't really see officials in any league that I think are that much worse than ours. And I actually think this has been one of the better years of Big Ten basketball officiating that I can recall. Now, it's a sliding scale, but not having the fans all over them. Now, I know you guys I know you're bitter right now because y'all got some traditional Big Ten homerism with the officials in Champaign last week, right? I mean, Garza's foul trouble. Illinois didn't get called for a foul, last 10 minutes or something of the game. So I know as an Iowa fan, y'all are, and I don't blame you, but that's what life was like every night on the road in this league with fans. Everywhere you went, you were going to get that. You had to know in most arenas in our league, you better be 8 to 10 points better than the home team, or you're not coming out of there with a win. So I actually think without that element, leaning on the refs, intimidating them the whole time, I actually think this has been one of the best years I can ever remember for Big Ten basketball officiating as a whole.
Fair enough.
All right. So now we'll come back with our question of the week and our feedback of the week to close it out next. All right. This week's Twitter poll, Aaron, we asked, do you think there needs to be a minimum games played threshold to be eligible to win the Big Ten basketball title this season? Now, what I love about polls like this is it gives us a great idea of the demographics of which schools' fan bases are really engaged on our show, right? Okay.
Yep.
So what this tells you is about 63% of the people who watch this show are Iowa fans, Illinois fans, Ohio State fans, Wisconsin fans, or just hate Michigan, okay? 37% of the people who watch this show are Michigan fans. Is it just that simple? Is that kind of what it, or do you think there's more to it than that?
You know, I think it is pretty simple. I think it is that simple. I'm torn about this because on the one hand, it's not the players' fault that they're subject to these just ridiculous, onerous guidelines laid out. At the same time, you got to play the games to win the games or have a chance to win the games. And if you don't, then you didn't play those games. You don't have that on your resume. And at the same time as well, I would like to see the people who made this decision or kowtowed to this decision punished for this stupid decision as well. So I'm kind of all over the place on this one.
I'm with you too. I am too. I think it's really difficult to put a requirement on it after what happened in the football program. Now, let's say we get down. I mean, Michigan can't be allowed. And I say this as a Michigan fan. Michigan cannot be allowed to be the sole Big Ten champion if at the end of the year, what are we right now? 8-1, I believe, right? If at the end of the year we're 11-1, and a whole bunch of other teams played 4, 5, 6 more games and have 3, 4, 5 losses, some accommodation has to be made for that. Whether it's shared championship, I don't know, but barring something extreme like that, given the precedent that was set in football, I can't see them kind of jacking with basketball. Can you? After what happened in football?
Not really, but anything is on the table in this unprecedented year.
Thank you very much. Let's get to this week's feedback of the week. And look at this as a video sent to us by Tony Pelzer. This is the 4th foul that was called on Luka Garza on the right. Look at this. First of all, that's terrible defense. All right, he just lets Coburn get the ball on his hip with no resistance, and literally all he's got to do is just drop step, turn around, and lay the ball in over Garza. So that's terrible defense, and yet at a key juncture in this game, Luka Garza called for his 4th foul.
That's a travel. I just now noticed that too.
And he traveled too. You're right. I just noticed that too. How many pivot feet does a man have? 4, right? Yes, he does the Lawrence walk there, a 1 and a 2 and a 3. Yes, that is. Now we're laughing, and listen, if I was an Iowa fan while this is going on, I am losing my bowels at home watching that. But folks, all our lives, this is what a road game was like in this league every night. Every night. It was like this if the other team was good. I mean, you didn't face this like at Northwestern, but when you played Indiana, Bobby Knight, Gene Cady in Purdue, Illinois, and Lute Henson, this happened every freaking night. You go to the Breslin Center every night. You're facing this in this league almost every single night.
Especially at the Breslin Center.
Yeah, so it's a farce. It's garbage, but in a strange way, doesn't it give you a little sense of normalcy? That you can still get jobbed on the road in the big... No. From an Iowa fan perspective, I totally get that. I tried. All right, that's going to do it for this week's edition of Bigger 10. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Bigger 10 to keep up to date on what we think all things Big 10 in between episodes. Like, rate, share, subscribe. 5-star review, whether it's iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, Google Play, however you access our show each and every week. Until the next time, for Aaron McIntire, I'm Steve Deace. We'll see you on Bigger 10.